I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts and Lazy Girl Designs, and welcome back to the Sweetpea Pod Sew Along. In this video, we're going to work on putting our zipper into our project. Let's get started. I'm over at the machine, and I'm going to start with my fabric that is fused to the fleece and 1/2 of my zipper. Make sure it is long enough. And if it is extra long, which in my case it is, you can either just center it or you can choose to start at least an inch off the project. You'll need at least an inch over there and leave the rest of the excess at the other end. You can use that for a grab tab for another project. So the first step is we are going to just sew the zipper with the teeth down. So if you look at the zipper, you have the teeth kind of stick up on one side. The other side is a little bit flatter. This is what we would call the back of the zipper. This is the front. So if you think of right sides together, you're putting the front of the zipper teeth down to the fabric. And we want to sew an 1/8 inch seam. And I find it best to do this whole project with a walking foot. And I would suggest to use coordinating thread. I'm going to be using black thread so that you'll be able to see my stitching. But I like to, my walking foot has like a little groove here, and I find that it rests really well in the zipper. So a lot of different ways to keep yourself straight here. You can line yourself up with the side of your presser foot. You can put tape on the bed of your sewing machine. I suggest you kind of test it out to see what works best for you and your machine. I'm using a stitch length of 3.0 for right now, and I am just going to stitch down the length, and I don't have anything clipped or pinned in place at this time. I'm just going to hold my zipper and make sure the raw edge of my zipper stays against the raw edge of my fabric. So here is our result. And the reason we want to make sure that is 1/8 of an inch, or definitely smaller than 1/4, is because in our next step, we're going to put fabric on and we're going to sew a bigger seam allowance. So now we're going to take our lining and we're going to line our lining up right on top of our main piece and the fusible fleece. So we're going to line it up here, line it up here, and line it up here. And then we are going to just take 1 or 2 clips and clip just at the bottom here and then a little bit more in. And we're going to flip this project over and we're going to sew from this side for 2 reasons. 1, better chance of this not stretching, and 2, so that we can see our first line of stitching and make sure that we sew 1/4 of an inch in now and have a more generous seam allowance. Most of the time you'll probably be okay sewing this way, but one tip that Joan had that I find works really well for me is, instead of using the clips, is to use basting tape. And I really like this basting tape from by Annie. I will say not all basting tapes are equal, and some of them, if you read the directions on the back, they will say that they can't be ironed, they can't be washed, can't be sewn through. They're just meant more for either temporary or permanent hems, and not meant for in the middle of a sewing project. This one is definitely designed for the middle of a sewing project. It's 1/8 of an inch wide, which is great, so none of it will be visible if your 1/4 inch isn't perfect. It is extra sticky. It says that on the package, and it is. And I'm simply going to start right here, and I'm just going to place it. It's sticky on the one side right now and paper on the other side, but it is a double stick tape. So I'm going to get to the end here, and then you can either use scissors or it rips really pretty easy. And now I'm going to go ahead and take the paper off. And this will allow me to stabilize this edge, which is bias, and prevent it completely from stretching when sewing it onto the zipper. I have made many Sweetpea pods, and I have found that the basting tape method, instead of just a couple clips, really is the one that I have the most success with. So you just double check, make sure everything's lined up. So now you can see from here, the raw edge is nice and neatly lined up with my zipper. So now I can confidently flip this over. And since I like having the teeth in the groove of my foot, I'm going to go ahead and move my needle over. So experiment with what you find works best to give you a nice straight 1/4 inch all the way down your zipper. What's most important is that you are straight, consistent, and you are more generous than your first line. It doesn't have to be exactly 1/4 of an inch as long as those other 3 things are true. There we go. Now we're going to head on over to the iron. We're going to go ahead and press to set that seam. And then we'll begin by peeling back our lining and pushing our lining away from the zipper. I like to do that with my finger first and then with the iron. And then we want to kind of train our zipper to go away from this piece. So we're going to kind of stick our iron underneath just to lift the zipper a little bit. Because here in our next step, what we're going to do is we're going to flip our lining underneath and push our zipper up. And you should have nice, even distance of zipper teeth all the way along the project. And you want to make sure when you're pressing that you're pressing well and pulling it against the seam. You don't want to end up with something, you know, this is a gross exaggeration, but something up like that. So you want to make sure you're pulling the zipper out. And I like to do it definitely with my hands first, and then come on in with the iron. And if needed, flip to the back, double check, make sure that the lining stayed nice and pressed as well. And it should match up here at the point. Your lining point should match up with your fleece if everything is going well. If it's not perfect, it's okay. I will show you how when we get to construction that we can work with a little bit of difference. And our next step is we are going to head back to the machine to sew a top stitching to create kind of a faux piping. So we're going to top stitch and we're going to do it just past the bulk of all of this. So just past, if you put your finger here, you can kind of feel a natural bump that goes down from the fleece and the fabric and the zipper tape. And so we are going to sew right along there, and that's going to create this nice faux piping. In your project, I suggest you use coordinating thread like I did. I'm going to show you with a dark thread now, just so you can clearly see where I'm stitching. I have my machine set to 3.0. And what I am going to do is line up the edge of my presser foot here with the edge of the zipper teeth so that I can stay nice and straight along the length of the piece. And we're simply going to top stitch down to create that faux piping. Thanks so much for joining us here today for the third video in the Sweetpea Pod Sew Along. I hope you enjoyed learning how to sew that zipper into your Sweetpea Pods. Please be sure to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back here in the fourth video to show you how to put that whole pod together.